Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here at the Iowa State Fair and have the opportunity to join you all at the Des Moines Register political soapbox. What's one of the most interesting things about my background is that I actually grew up in eastern Iowa in Jones County. And while I know a lot of you here are probably from rural Iowa, and so that's probably close to a lot of people. But in today's life, though, I live in actually Ames, Iowa. And I went to Ames after I graduated from high school. I graduated from Iowa State. I've got a degree in ag education. Go Cyclones, that's right. I've got a degree in ag education as well as a master's in it. And following graduation at Iowa State, I went into more in the policy type of life, and I've been involved in not only government affairs, but also in the political aspect of things as well. And it's been exciting throughout basically the last 20 years of my life being able to do that. And what really got me excited about the opportunity to run for political office was when I lived in Ames, Iowa. And that's when I had the opportunity to serve on the city council. And through that role, I had the opportunity to be really a fiscal steward, a fiscal watchdog of the city's finances. Because truth be told, tax dollars are your dollars. And one of the things I think is very important as a state treasurer is that we need someone that is the taxpayer's advocate. Because each and every person in this state, from the youngest infant that was just recently born to the oldest person in the state, each of you are paying taxes. Whether it's your property taxes, your income taxes, sales tax. And we need someone that's in the state treasurer's office watching over those dollars, being the advocate for each of you, because those taxpayer dollars are important. One of the things I think is often lacking in the state treasurer's office today is the fact that it's recognized that the state treasurer is the chief revenue officer of the state. But when's the last time he reached out to Iowans and asked, how do you feel your money's being spent? Is it being spent appropriately by the legislature? Is the governor introducing the type of budget that meets the needs of all Iowans? I think it's important that we as a state treasurer, reach out to Iowans, find out what their thoughts are and where the budget is at, and be the advocate for each person so that way you know where your state treasurers and your state taxes are being spent. Now, one of the things I referenced earlier is that I grew up in rural Iowa in Jones County. And the state fair is very near and dear to me because as I was growing up, I exhibited livestock along the way for many years, from 4-H when I was younger to ultimately then in FFA. And through that experience, I learned the opportunity to interact with and get to know and network and build my leadership skills up and have the opportunity to speak in front of a lot of different people. And so the 4-H and FFA programs are very near and dear to my heart, and through also the livestock side as well. One of the other interesting things about my background here at the State Fair, unlike a lot of people, many people come to the State Fair once a year for one day. Well, when I was a state FFA officer, I had the opportunity to stay here in the fairgrounds for 14 days straight. Because when you're a state officer, you get to do that. And being at the State Fair for 14 days straight, you not only learn about what the State Fair is, you learn about the people that make the State Fair work. And you learn about the people that come to the state fair. It's your everyday Iowans, whether it's folks from rural Iowa, folks from urban parts of the state, out-of-state guests and visitors, and you learn how their feelings are about the state. And you watch each and every year what their opinions are about what they think is going on in the state. Sometimes things are going great. Other times things are not. And when you learn about those experiences and you hear their opinions and you hear their thoughts, you not only then get an opportunity to appreciate their opinions, but you then have the opportunity to think about it as well. And so over the last several weeks since I got nominated to be the state treasurer candidate, I've had the opportunity to go throughout the state at various different events, hear from different Iowans, listening to each of your thoughts. And one of the things I think I found most important is the fact that people want a state treasurer that brings integrity and ethics to the office of the state treasurer. One of the concerns that has gone on for several years with the Office of the State Treasurer is that our current state treasurer has utilized media to promote himself utilizing public dollars. I pointed that part out when I was nominated at the state GOP convention. And guess what? His spokesperson responded to OK Henderson and said, well, those are not taxpayer dollars. Those funds are coming from the Iowa's College Savings Plan, the 529 plan, because that's a self-sustaining program. So if those dollars are coming from a self-sustaining program that's utilized to promote himself for many times for over the last couple decades, guess what that really means? He's utilizing the investment revenue of hardworking Iowans that invested into the 529 program for his self-promotion. And I applaud the state legislature for stopping that. But guess what? He's done that for multiple years. And it's time that type of ethics ends at the state capitol, because we need a state treasurer that has ethics and integrity and 100% transparency in all the finances of our state. The other thing that happens when he utilized those revenue dollars that were coming from the 529 plan, he took money away from each and every Iowan that has invested into that program. We know that the cost of education in the higher ed realm is going up each and every year. And that is due to multiple different factors. But when he has utilized the revenue from a self-sustaining program called the 529 plan for self-promotion, that is wrong. And that type of activities will not be tolerated if I'm the state treasurer. Like I said earlier, my vision is to have 100% transparency in the office of the state treasurer. I believe it's important that every Iowan knows exactly where their taxpayer dollars are being spent. From when you're looking at the budget, and they can go onto a website and see exactly each budget line item and see exactly how those funds are being spent. Because I think it's very important that Iowans not only see where their transactions are being spent, but also then have an opportunity to bring forward their opinions as to why it's being spent in a certain area versus why it's not being. Now, like I said earlier, one of my priorities when elected is going to be able to go to the state legislature and point out things on behalf of Iowans, because each Iowan needs to have the advocate there. And I will be that advocate for you and every Iowan when elected as the state treasurer, and I think that's very important. The other thing I want to talk to you about today is something that's kind of unique, and it's something I touched on just a moment ago, and that is our higher education system in Iowa. Now, I know a lot of folks here are either alums of Iowa State or the University of Iowa or Northern Iowa or one of the many colleges, private colleges or community colleges in the state. And that's great. I'm a proud Cyclone fan, as you know. But one of the things I often see is the fact that in state government and in any government entity, there's a lot of duplication of services and redundancy and wasteful spending. One of my goals when I'm elected is to launch a task force that starts identifying where those redundancy of services are at and the duplication of services and the redundancy of spending. Because if we're going to do things right in Iowa and monitor the spending and be fiscally responsible for each and every dollar that's spent, we need to look at where those dollars are being spent at. Here's a great for example that I think is very relevant. The Iowa Board of Regents is the overseeing department that looks over the 3 regent universities. We've got Iowa State University, University of Iowa, and Northern Iowa. But guess what? There are 3 accounting and financial platforms individually for each one of those universities. So Iowa State has their own, University of Iowa has its own, Northern Iowa has its own. 25, 30 years ago, that was fine, and you could understand why, because of distance. But guess what today? We have high-speed gigabit internet service. We have cloud services. We have new technology. Why is it that the 3 regent universities have to have their own individual standalone cost financial accounting platforms that cost each of the universities money? What if we brought all those together into a unified financial platform? Look at the savings that could be done from that. Now, is there going to be an initial investment to build a platform? Yes, there is, but there is cost savings that can be attained by unifying the financial platforms of the 3 regent universities. And guess what that does? That brings down the overall cost of higher education for Iowa. And now, as we know, the cost of universities has kept going up each and every year for the past several years. That's not going to change. But we as the state leadership need to make the hard discussions and the hard decisions that will ultimately help either stabilize or bring down the cost of higher education in the state. And it's not directly the cost for the state of Iowa that I'm concerned by. It's the cost of every young man and woman that's going to be going to those institutions. And then I think that's very important that we look at where those dollars are at, because if we do not do stuff to start controlling the cost of higher education in the state, we're going to continue saddling our young people with debt when they're graduating college. Now, just a few years ago, Iowa was one of the top states for graduating students with student debt. I think that's wrong. This is Iowa. We're supposed to be proud of our education. We've got a strong K-12 system. We're investing heavily into K-12. We're one of the top states for investing into K-12. If we're doing that for K-12, Why are we not looking at the expenses of higher education in the state and start bringing and reining in those expenses right from the get-go? Those are things that we should be doing as in the role of the state treasurer, is looking where those redundancy of services are at. Now, like I said earlier, one of the roles I believe is important about the state treasurer, it's the chief revenue officer of the state. Now, when people hear that, they think, well, that's just the tax collector. And in some cases, that's correct. But guess what it also means? It also means it's one of the chief economic motivators and advocates for the state. Because in Iowa, when our agriculture and our manufacturing sectors are strong and growing, and we're exporting our products, whether it's domestically or internationally, through growing export markets overseas, we're bringing in additional tax revenue because our economy is growing and it's healthy, and that is a good thing for Iowa. And if the state treasurer is out there promoting Iowa products, being the advocate that we need for economic development, and expanding our export opportunities, both domestically and internationally, guess what that does? That brings more tax revenue into the state, and then we go to the state legislature and we tell them, now we're bringing you revenue, let's bring down the tax rate. We addressed some tax reforms here this past year in the state legislature. It's time to make it better for Iowans by reducing those rates better and putting more dollars into each and every Iowan's pocketbook. And I think we can do that. The federal government started out this past year by making tax reforms, and I can almost be willing to bet nearly every person in this audience here has received the benefit of that already. If you filed your tax returns, you've seen the tax impacts of that, and you're seeing more money in your daily paycheck than what you did just 12 months ago. And that is a good thing. Combine that with the changes that have been made at the state legislature this past year, we can do better. As we're growing our economy, being out there promoting our exports markets, growing our ag and manufacturing sectors, we can grow our economy even more, and we can take Iowa to a new level of revenue that can then, at the end of the day, get the legislature to act to bring down our tax rates even more and put more money into each and every Iowan's pocket. And when we do that, we are going to be successful, not only as a state government, but as a people of this state, because then it translates down to each and every one of your local communities and counties. Because if our state's revenue is growing and our communities are healthy, our communities are thriving, we have workforce opportunities, we have a successful state. That's what it means to be an economic advocate for our Iowa. And the state treasurer's office, I think, needs to be one of the strongest economic advocates in this state. Because being the taxpayer's advocate is not just watching out for the tax dollars. It's watching out to help us grow the tax dollars so we can then lower the tax rates for each and every Iowan, so every one of you have more money to spend, and we have a stronger, healthier, and more vibrant Iowa. Thank you all very much. It's been great to be here. I'm looking forward to being elected your next state treasurer. Thank you all very much.